All right. Good morning, everyone. Today is going to be kind of short. We just have a few of the slides to go through, and then we'll do the last page of the guided notes. And then tomorrow we'll probably do like a reading. I'm trying to change up the format a little bit. So with no further ado, let's get started. On the last bit of Latin America. If it goes by super fast, we may just do a small reading today as well. So, last week we ended talking about some important dates. 1494, 1493, oh shoot. We have the Treaty of Tordesillas, which sets up where Spain can colonize and where Portugal can colonize back in those days. We've got about 25 years later, the conquest of the Aztec and Inca empires from the Spanish, and the Portuguese also had their own little bits of conquest in some parts of the Amazon, some parts of Brazil. Not as big though, because they didn't have the big empires in their land like the Spanish did. So we had Spain in control of much of North and South America at the time that had been discovered for a couple hundred years, for about 300 years, perhaps a little bit less, 250-ish. And that's when many of these colonies begin to break away from Spain and gain independence and form their own governments and their own kind of national heritage. And so by 1953, most all of South America and North America are now indigenously controlled, so controlled by people who live there. There's still some parts holding out. And then the Cuban Revolution happens in 1953, where Cuba tries to overthrow a general who has ties to the American government. They succeed. And then Cuba and the Soviet Union worked really hard to spread socialism throughout the region. And many Latin American countries still have some form of socialism in their government. Venezuela and Cuba are the most socialist, with overtly socialist governments, where Brazil, Ecuador, Chile, and Bolivia all have democratically elected governments nowadays. I think, not quite sure about Ecuador completely. So we're going to go to taking a closer look at the favelas of Sao Paulo, Brazil. So in Sao Paulo, there are these beautiful buildings, gorgeous parts of the city, but then there are also slums and shanty towns around as well, because there's much poverty in Brazil. So we have slums or shanty towns located within or on the outskirts of the country's large cities. So favelas, that's what a favela is. They grow when migrants and former slaves were pushed out of major cities. So a lot of it is racially motivated. It's the European elites kind of discriminating against natives or people of color is a lot of it. So many people become squatters. So basically what they do is just kind of set up shanty towns. Wood, scraps, brick, and cinder blocks, essentially, any kind of thing. So they're semi-permanent structures for the most part. They're not like the tent cities you would see around here where homeless people live. A lot of these people they still work. They just work jobs that are that underpay them. So out of 6 million people in Sao Paulo, 22% of them live in the favelas. So 22% of the city doesn't even have a real house. So it's a pretty endemic problem. It's kind of a, oh shoot, it's just taking forever to load. Bring in the photos. And so these are kind of like the favela structures. They're not really regulated. They're just kind of built. So you have, what happened to the mouse? You have inside the city here, and then here you have the favela. And this is all very unregulated. There's not many streets going through. It's not built with any kind of organization in mind. And sometimes, like if an earthquake hits or something, a lot of those kinds of structures, they will collapse, and it's very dangerous. So as you can see, someone who lives here, they don't really have access to a road necessarily. There's sort of one out there, but you wouldn't be able to park really. So there's some cars in there. You can see a pretty stark contrast line right here, where I'm pointing at the screen, where to the left of it, this is the favela, and then to the right of it is the city. So you can just kind of tell the difference in development. They got this beautiful pool. Every single one of these balconies has a little tiny pool in it, it looks like. They got a nice tennis court. So this is obviously a nice building. And then right over there, they've got the favela, and a lot of poverty, lots of crime and stuff going on in that area. So urbanization in Latin America. So urban would be people like you and I who live inside the city. And then rural is out in the countryside. So look at the chart and examine the rate of urbanization in Latin America. So what happens to the urban-rural divide after 1950? Well, here in 1950, it looks like urban is smaller than rural. About 30 million people, roughly, maybe 40, live inside urban areas, and over 50 million, probably about 60-ish or something like that. Excuse me. They live in rural areas, like out in villages and in the countryside. And by 1990, those numbers have drastically changed. There's more opportunity in the city, so people leave their farms out in the countryside and move into the cities and try and find work at different kinds of jobs that can earn more money than farming. So by 2018, it is a very stark difference, and we're projecting by 2030, there will be not many people living in rural areas anymore. How do you think sociologists make these predictions? Well, they use trends, they use data, that's basically it. They look at numbers of people who live inside the city now when they do censuses. There's really not much of a reason for someone to live in the rural areas because there's no opportunity out there. There's no jobs besides farming, really, and farming doesn't make you much money out there. So we got some environmental issues that we're going to highlight. This is in Mexico City. Mexico City is experiencing high pollution in their city, which is causing residents to lose their sense of smell. So essentially, residents are urged to stay indoors many times of the year at different times when the levels get bad. The population of Mexico City is 20 million people, and it is located on a plateau between two mountain ranges and volcanoes. So all of the pollution that they make, the wind is blocked by these different mountains and volcanoes. And so the wind isn't really able to carry away the pollution very well. It doesn't blow it apart. So the pollution from the city's factories and cars and stuff, it just kind of sits in the city and doesn't go anywhere. So the air quality is really bad. Mexico City is actually sinking because they built it. They drained a lake and built Mexico City there. And the ground doesn't provide a very good foundation. So Mexico City is facing some problems that they're going to have to figure out how to solve with that issue. And also with their air quality. So people are losing their sense of smell. People are experiencing lung issues. Essentially, I've heard, but I'm not entirely sure if it is completely true, that being in Mexico City, walking around for a week is like smoking a pack of cigarettes. Solutions. So that these are some ideas that the Mexican government has floated to try to solve this problem. And it is preventing some vehicles from driving on certain days of the week. So maybe Sunday or something like that, you wouldn't be able to drive. You would have to take maybe public transport or walk or bike. They want to require specific industries to cut their emissions. Mexico's factories and things like that, coal factories and stuff. And they want to redesign the city buses to be energy efficient, kind of fix their infrastructure. So China has been selling cheap electric buses to Latin America at a pretty big rate, and Latin American countries are buying them, including Mexico. So do we think these solutions are enough? These are actually pre-COVID pictures. So these guys are not wearing these masks because of COVID. They're wearing these masks because of the air quality within Mexico City. And this is a list of things that were cited. This is where all the information was pulled from. Rock on. All right. So I will post the guided notes. We made it through at 12 minutes. Good. It was perfect timing. And tomorrow we'll probably do a reading. And we'll just continue focusing on a couple Latin American countries, and then we'll probably switch to Europe, and we'll try and get, maybe we won't. I'll make the decision tonight, but we might just go right to Europe tomorrow, because there isn't that much time left, and maybe spending this week on Europe would be a good idea, so we can move this class along. I'll think about it, and you'll know tomorrow. Have a good day, guys.